Hold on. Let me
What a
check that.
time. What a time. So let's get this thing started, right? So what a time. What a time.
You
Welcome
know,
everyone listening in. This is our experiment of a little sports podcast. You've got the GOAT Donray Bennett. Got your host here as well, Scott Blair. We're going to chop up all things sports. Probably look to do this maybe once a week.
absolutely.
And what do we got today? Today is December 3rd, and lots of stuff going on in the sports world. Our motivation was to make this a thing, to talk a little bit about the college football playoffs. But Donray, maybe we need to do some appetizers, because I woke up this morning and the first thing that I saw, I don't know if you even saw it, was that Ime Udoka, the head coach of the Houston Rockets, got ejected last night after having a little bit of a conversation with LeBron James during their game last night. So
I haven't even seen it yet.
I'm like, wait, what happened? So we got to get some more information on what went down there. But yeah, they were talking on the sideline in front of the Rockets bench, and the official was standing next to them. And next thing you know, Udoka got the tee, and he's tossed from the game. So I wonder what the two of them were talking about last night.
Interesting.
Maybe they were
Interesting.
maybe they were debating the worthiness of Florida State in the playoffs. I don't know. So we'll get to that.
But it's interesting that I mean a a coach standing in the spot. I mean, it's not like he was any could have been anywhere outside of his, limited range of where he can be on the court, gets ejected for a player approaching him, and it was just a conversation. I pulled it up real quick to look at the short.
Yeah,
Like, what could have possibly been said? It didn't seem confrontation. Like, it didn't seem. Yeah, I'll wait to hear. I'll wait to hear, because he must have said something for it to just be an ejection like that.
that's crazy. That's
Wait,
crazy.
who just a dope? Was LeBron ejected too?
No, it's just Udoka. It looks like it was just Udoka that was tossed. So,
These refs are out of control.
well, then we got that too, right? We got the Scott Foster and what's his name, Chris Paul, like that. The statistics are overwhelming at this point. You got to know there's a bias there.
Yeah, and people are confirming what Chris Paul heard. I mean,
What are we doing?
yeah,
What are we doing here? All right, let's get.
everyone wants shine, Scott. Everyone wants shine, and
Yeah,
so
that's true.
um, I've always thought this about refs. I think for the most part, them going on a power trip is probably the least of what could be happening. I think the average individual who would be in a position to get talked to, yelled at, the masculine, well, female or male, like just stripped of your masculinity or femininity or whatever it is in front of millions of people, countless
That's fair.
times. I mean, what other job can you walk around and people can yell at you and it's okay?
And
Like
it's okay.
it's part of it. Um, and now that it's, when it's a couple times a week on some local cable station, and you're traveling in from wherever, and you get to go home, and kids don't know anything, wife, husband, no one knows about it. That's one thing. But in 2023, I just pulled it up on a quick short on YouTube. You know what I mean? So anything and everything you do is now being amplified, seen by the communities at large, no matter where you live. And if I got to come home to my kid watching me get yelled at, and just, this is bound to happen, and I think it only gets worse before it gets better. And as much as I can't stand these refs for giving tees for mean mugging or celebrating or whatnot, I also think that something has to be done with how they're treated too. So even though I'm pro, these refs need to change first and immediately, no matter how unfair that
Truth.
may sound.
Truth.
Something has to be done too with the way,
It's awful.
the
Oh,
complaining and just play. If you watch these
it's like
games in
AU
other
ball.
countries,
It's like
right?
AU ball.
But
Oh,
it's possible when you watch these FIBA games in other countries, it's nothing like
yeah,
this.
it's true. Yeah,
It
it's
is
fair.
there's so, and I shouldn't say all countries. I haven't seen it all, but So watching something recently of it was American speaking of his game in Italy or something, and then they showed like shorts of the Italian ref and how he's conducting himself, and I was like, this is amazing. And he didn't complain, and the ref talked to him the
Stay
whole game.
level.
It
Just
was like the most respectful
stay
thing ever.
balanced.
But they respect like that. You can't. Same thing happens in like China, I know, and stuff like that, where it's complete. You got to worry about losing a foot or something probably if you come out of character during a game. Is it extreme? Yes, but does it work to give you a clean game where people are respectful of each other? Yeah, absolutely. Except for those brawls that break out once in a while, but you
And
know,
it could be part of their entertainment thing too. Who knows? That could be part of their shtick. So
absolutely.
almost WWE-esque, which I know was a thing here in the Lehigh Valley, having the WWE in town. I understand last night, I think. So
Ooh,
hold up. So we got to pivot real quick. So we got a couple of things. One, you're rocking your Kutztown University. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. Can we chop that up real quick? We're going to do this kind of pardon the interruption style here.
all
A
right,
couple of
let's go.
like minute and a half, 2 minutes snapshots here. Shout out to the GOATs, Mike Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser. Yeah, K-Town football. They had a big win yesterday.
Look, it came in under unusual circumstances. For those who don't know, the Kutztown football team had a lower seed, so a higher ranking, whichever way you want to look at it, than Slippery Rock, who they had just beaten for the conference title a couple weeks back. And so they were a 3 seed. Slippery Rock was a 4 seed. So in the quarterfinals, obviously they should be playing at Kutztown. Unfortunately, the athletic director, or I'll
Or
say the
somebody,
team, I'll say
somebody,
the team because Scott and I have varying
somebody. I don't know.
opinions on what happened. So we can dive into that a little bit. So the Kutztown team, not the football team, but the administration did not properly submit a bid in time to host the third round of playoffs for Division II football playoff. And as a result, and Slippery Rock's team did, administration did, and as a result, even though they had the better seed, the Kutztown football team had to travel
But they
to
won.
a conference rival and play, but they won.
But they
Although
won.
statistically, it looked like they got
But
it
the defense
handed to
showed
them.
up. Yeah, but the defense made plays when they needed to.
But they made plays when they needed to. So defense scored pick six, taking it the entire
109-yard return.
109 yard. You can't get any longer than that.
That's amazing.
So, obviously, and winning by 12, some of those turnovers inside the 5, inside the red zone are obviously why they pulled it out. So they pulled it out. But, so shout out to them going to the semis. They'll be in Colorado next Saturday, 3 o'clock or
3 o'clock
3:30
Eastern
kickoff.
time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Playing in Denver.
but can we stop here though? Can we, because you and I have had some conversations. I think you represent the majority on this and every common sense individual, your position on it. I also feel that way. However, I'm thinking it's definitely a little different. How does something of that magnitude happen at
That's
a university where you submitted the bid for the first
first
home
round.
game
For the first round
for
of
the first
playoffs.
round, but you missed the third? Talk to me. What say you?
Okay, so a couple things, right? Is I volunteer as a coach at the university, so I got a little bit of a fine line I got to walk here. But a couple of things, and for those of you that are sports fans, you know how brackets work, right? So if you had that knowledge that and granted there's deadlines, you have to submit things to the NCAA. So when we talk about this, the fact that there wasn't any sort of flex from the NCAA is a little bit of a seriously, come on, like understand the spirit of competition and stuff. But if you know you're going to have the ability, or you think you'll have the ability to host, that means you're going to be seated in a very particular manner, which is probably in that 2 to 3 range, right? So if that's where you're going to be, then when you build that out to the next round, because you're the potential 2 or 3 seed, there's a possibility you're going to host again. So the fact that, well, we know what's in the papers, right? What's in the papers is that it was an administrative error. apologies to the players and the families, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Donray and I are both alums, and I also coach there, of course, right? So thinking this is not a good look, and then thinking about it as a sports fan, you should be able to pull out the bracket and have a, all right, well, if we win this first round game, there's a good possibility that 2 weeks later, if we keep winning, we're going to have the possibility to host again because of where our seed is probably going to be. Now, granted, you have to submit a bid in October, so there's a lot of speculation, but there's no cost to submit a bid from what I understand. So that's the part. And I believe there's some, and there's the revenue generation, I assume, from hosting a game. And there's part of this this is the part I'm going to add because I don't know what the answer to that question is with respect to revenue generation. But I'm thinking about revenue generation for the community, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're the host, it's not just about you. And that's what universities talk about, right? They don't exist in a vacuum. So hosting a game, what does that do? That brings in the opposing fans. They got to go eat somewhere. They got to stay in a hotel somewhere. All of that. They got to entertain themselves. That's some good revenue that certainly college towns are excited to get from September through November, and now we're talking about December, of course. So that's the part where it's like, wait, how does this get missed? You're able to do it all for that first round game, but it sounds suspicious that there was some sort of either someone said something to somebody, or there was we don't know if we're going to make it that far, or maybe there's competing priorities and we don't know if we want to host. And that's curious. Let's just say that.
And here's where I'll it's crazy because I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I do think, and I like to think there's a reason why it has to be submitted so early, and the NCAA needs to know and can't be flexible. I like to think that it probably has something to do with business and proper planning and media communications and making sure those who are covering.
You're hosting a football game.
I mean, they can change where college game day is going. They decide where college game day is going to be on.
We're not talking about the Rose Bowl here, Donray. This isn't the Rose Bowl.
But here's where I go. I genuinely believe that individuals get to certain spots, especially to become an AD at a Division II school or even higher up from there. There is a level of intelligence and competence that you have. And so I can't, with the number one sport, even in Division II, being, football and it being in the attraction. And you talked about the potential revenue that could be generated by the community. Then there's the the intangible, the stuff that you can't quantify, like the amount of eyes and attention that you'll get to your university. So when you talk about enrollment, right? When you talk about the amount of high school athletes or even non-athletes just to hear your school, or the traveling team that's going to come and support, and all of the related youth that could be, associated with the fans in attendance, the high schools attending. I mean, it has an effect not only on the bottom line, but then on the future as well, because you're getting free advertisement, free everything. When you look at UMBC's attendance or applications or George Mason back when they made the run in the basketball tourney, like there's an immediate boost, infusion to the applications of the general population who are trying to get to your university. So there's value there. Yes. Having said all that, especially post-COVID, it is extremely tight around higher education. There's this cliff that everyone talks about, students not being able to, not enough students to enroll.
You got to get people to your campus. Why would you say no to this? You've got schools
in the PSAC, which is Kutztown's conference, that are consolidated. They just consolidated. So the bottom line, the bottom line is very important, though. And so I was told by a mutual friend, I think you've met my friend Tom, who's an athletic director himself and been in the game for a long time, that it's very possible that hosting a game places a financial burden on the school. But the amount that they bring in versus the amount that it costs to host, not the bid, but whatever else goes into the process.
Time out.
It's possible that it's a financial burden.
The school hosted the quarterfinals 2 years earlier. So the whole cost thing, they literally did this. They did it and they got it right 2 years earlier. It was
Are you sure it didn't cost
it was 2 years earlier.
Okay,
they hosted the same game, the quarterfinal. They hosted, and it was a heartbreaking loss. They lost by a Hail Mary to
yes,
the quarterback for
horrendous.
Shepherd, who is now the backup for my Chicago Bears. So they've
Crazy.
already done this.
Yes,
How
but
can you not get this right 2 years later?
no, I think that
No.
feeds my point, my position even more. They did it 2 years ago. They saw what it ended up, the effect it ended up having, that it wasn't, maybe they didn't make money. Maybe it literally cost them a couple thousand or tens of thousands of dollars in the long run, total. Because I don't know what all goes into the cost of hosting versus what the revenue generated. I mean, all you're probably getting out of it at the time is tickets and parking. And so if that doesn't offset whatever costs are associated with it, they could point to 2 years ago. Look, 2 years ago, we lost. I'm throwing out a number because I have zero idea. 2 years ago, it ended up costing us, 18,000, 25,000. We're 50,000 in the whole, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what it cost them or if they made money. And if it cost them money, let's just put it like this. Let's just say it cost them money. And the bottom line is it didn't generate revenue. It actually cost them as a financial burden 2 years ago. Then that stands to reason why they would have done this year. We can't do it. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was a directive from higher up. Like, listen, we don't have it in the budget. And so if we get that far, kudos, but we're not paying for it this time. That's how I see it coming. I can't envision a Division II athletic department, athletic directors department overseeing, making a mistake. That doesn't happen. There's no way that happens. That is your priority.
So what would
shout out to the women's field hockey team that just won the championship.
First
There's
time
no
ever
way,
for the school too.
Yeah, salute, round of applause for that. But there's no way that is occurring, and that's going to overshadow. You can compartmentalize. You work year in and year out on 21 or 22 different Division II athletics. You can't tell me in a time of year where only 2 or 3 are super highlighted. Come on, there's nothing else to focus on. Basketball just got
you're making a lot of assumptions with that. You're making a lot of assumptions, and I'm not going to say much more because I don't want to get into a place that might be weird. But the one thing I will say is, and this is the hypothetical, I guess, for people that would be listening in, is what would sound better in the public space? Hey, we missed the deadline, and that stinks, and we're sorry to the football team for missing the deadline and having an administrative error, or saying we've hosted this before, we had staffing concerns, we don't know if we were able to do this right, there were some financial items to this, and that's the reason why we passed. What would sound better? Because option B was not done. It was option A. It was an administrative error, and stinks, we missed on this. So that's, regardless of what we may or may not think, we have to respond to what's out there in what you can read in the papers.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying.
You got that?
What I'll say is with option B, taking accountability, that puts the school on notice and opens yourself up to a barrage of concerns and being student first. And well, why would I send my kid to play football there when they're clearly not a priority, ... And option A is more of a, we can remedy this easily. This will never happen again. This was a person error. You put somebody on the fire, and if we win, it's more or less forgotten about anyway.
So you would think with the first one that there would be some sort of a personnel change, right? We're not calling for that. We're just saying, right? Certainly not calling for that. Not calling for that. But just speaking with this, right? So I think that's a good way to kind of summarize it. How would you perceive this if you're someone, if you're looking, if you've got a future recruit, what sounds better? To me, I probably would have landed, if that was a reality, with the second option, which is, what we discussed. So this was a fun topic. Let's move to our next
Yeah.
one. Let's move to our next one. Let's move to our next one. So let's do a super quick hot take, and then we're going to move to our major topic for the morning.
Okay.
Let's do a hot take. So I know for you and I, this is an interesting time of the year because of the football season. So let's move to the NFL real quick. Of course, you've got your eyes on all things Philadelphia. I'm going to do a really quick hot take with my boys, my Bears. As you can see, the helmet behind me, some of the tchotchkes behind me. Stay moisturized, everyone. That's some hand moisture back there because you got to, right? We two Latin brothers, and this
Oh yeah.
northeast.
You got the flag up. You got the flag. See,
And
I
I
don't got
got
anything
yeah.
representing
See, I got the
future. We gotta
Venezuelan
do it for my.
flag.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it for my lab next time.
Shout
I
out
got all my
to
Philly stuff and everything.
shout out to Don McPherson. I got your book back there, my brother, and everybody else. But Bears hot take. Listen, I come from the school of thought. I think Justin Fields is capable. I think this is the one time, I guess, where I'm gonna do a little call out of individuals. I think our offensive coordinator, there's clearly a disconnect between the philosophy of a system versus the strengths of your player. And we saw this last year. I remember it well. Last year, Chicago played Washington, lost 12-7 in Chicago. And I think it was Thursday night, Amazon crew just put the offensive staff on blast and just said, what are you doing with this kid? He can move, he's mobile, he can throw out of the pocket, and that's not what you're doing with the offense. And what happened? They were on a mini bye because they played on a Thursday, and the rest of the year, the offense changed. Justin Fields is moving. He's rushing for over 1,000 yards. And the Bears were competitive. Even though they didn't beat anybody, they were competitive. They almost beat your Eagles. They were competitive with a whole bunch of teams at the end of the season. And then what do? We start the season off with a couple of games, and it looks like we had the same approach that we had at the beginning of last year. It's like, what did you spend the whole offseason doing? You should have been building on what was working, but it looks like you regressed to your system. And all Bears fans, I think, can remember that game against Tampa. We had a chance to come on out with a closing drive to win. We ran 3 straight plays that were exactly the same. A screen pass. Tampa intercepted it. After the game, they asked, how'd you do it? They're like, they ran the same play 2 times before that. So how do you keep an offensive personnel where that's where they're doing? That's their approach. That's their approach. I think you draft a lineman, an offensive tackle in particular. You get Marvin Harrison Jr. He is going to be a generational talent, just like his dad. You build around Fields and DJ Moore, and let's just keep moving. The defense is settling in. So that's my Bears hot take. Let's move to the Eagles.
It's simple. We have a history, especially back when we made the run 17, 18. Where we've made late season additions, and because of the locker room, we were able to navigate it well. Whether it was Jay Ajayi, in the backfield. But this year we're flirting with something that I'm not sure I can get behind fully. Shaq Leonard, first of all, potentially waiting to the side, which I don't like that at all. The whole waiting. Maybe there's other things behind it. Maybe they've already agreed. Maybe you have to wait to a certain time because of the way money talks and contracts are written. I don't know. I always like to assume there's better behind the scenes than I know, more than I know.
That injury is pretty significant too.
It is, but he passed the physical. So if that's the case, then last word I saw before hitting the hay last night was that he was waiting till after the Eagles game to announce his decision between Dallas and Philly. Now, if he wanted Dallas, he probably would have just accepted there. So it just looks a little shady. Like, let me wait to see who wins. I don't know. But a little reserved on that because he had a big number leaving Indianapolis, and I wonder how that's going to affect the cap. Although I know, Howie Roseman is pretty good with numbers, so I will trust that. But I'm a little reserved on that. I'm not as gung ho as everyone else. Okay. The second.
I want to hear this
concern is with Frank Reich's recent release as head coach mid-season.
You want to bring him back? You want to bring him back?
The quick answer is yes.
Okay.
But because I, along with a lot of other folks, are not very comfortable with the offensive coordinator's work this year. Now he's got to get his feet wet and get, acclimated and whatnot. I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and really have him work. But a lot of the Eagles' struggles I think offensively can be linked back to similar to the Bears situation where someone's got an idea of how an offense should be run, as opposed to saying, look what I have, let me run
Yeah,
something that's best for
yeah,
them. It stands to reason you give the ball to Swift in the backfield every 3 downs, and that will be a first down automatically, practically.
listen,
And yet we're
I'm with
coming
you.
out throwing the
I'm with
ball,
you.
and how we're throwing the ball and the routes we're putting AJ in. He's very easily double
Yeah,
teamed, and he still beats it. But why should he? Why can't we scheme up something where he's getting isolated here or there? Throw him in a slot from time to time. Well, there's things that can be done that isn't being done. I'm not sure if it's a limitation, if it's a, hey, I know we can win like this, and this is my first year. Let me, navigate it. But what I'm concerned with is with Frank Reich becoming available, and him, he brought in Sirianni when he was coaching in Indianapolis. It stands to reason he might do the same. Maybe he comes on as a consultant. That would be cool. My question then is, what position does that put your OC
mm,
in? That's a
that's
very
fair.
odd dynamic to go on when the whole world's going to be chanting for the offensive coordinator of our last champion a couple of years ago,
That's
who
fair.
was Frank Reich at the time. And so it actually wouldn't be. I
But
think it may not be the best thing for the locker room, although being so veteran centric, that locker room seems to be able to withstand any distractions. But this would be one that I would want
that's a strength
for.
builder. Yeah, I think you're getting
I
stronger
would
doing that.
think but it does leave me some concern as to,
I hear you. Listen,
if how that planning room, how that room looks like when they're planning the upcoming year, the prep for the upcoming week.
two chefs
What
in the
is that?
kitchen. Yeah, two
Yeah,
chefs in the
that's
kitchen.
that's that's my biggest worry. But I would love and prefer Frank Reich at this point. However, this late in the season, I'm scared to go back to that well where we're making these late season adjustments. And last year in Ndamukong Suh, bringing him on later, it works. It has worked because we have such a veteran centric locker room. It's really hard to shake that.
Yeah.
But that's a so Shaq. I even be okay with Shaq Leonard, although our linebackers are very young. So, and his issue is really with the playing time and whatnot. He wants to play. But then I think we can overcome that. But
How about Zach Ertz? How about Zach Ertz? He's out there.
oh yeah. And Zach, I think that's a gimme. I think that's a
Okay.
layup.
Okay.
I actually wasn't even going to bring that one up simply because
You should.
he wants to go to contender, aka the Eagles.
And he still got some game in
He
him.
he left here beloved, him and his wife, by the way, and they're going to come
Outstanding.
back. He's still got game in him. Stoll,
Number
I like
love,
him.
U.S. women's
Great,
soccer.
yeah.
Number love.
And the guy who he's coming in really to Stoll, who's come up after Dallas Goddard's injury.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. He plays within the system, but he's not. He doesn't get the types of offensive the looks, his route running and whatnot. So there's a need for Ertz to come in
Nice.
and fill the gap
Yeah.
until Goddard gets back.
Okay.
So yeah.
Oh, one last thing. Another see if again we grew up with part of the interruption, right? Being in college. So here's another PTI connection, right? I think there's a thing out there that whenever Wilbon references Chicago, folks do some things. So maybe you can do that with all things Kutztown. So we mentioned Frank Reich. We got to give shout out to Frank Reich, right? Leading one of the biggest comebacks in NFL history, Buffalo Bills. And who was the main guy that helped him with that? Kutztown's own Andre Reed. So
Andre Reed's there. Absolutely.
The GOAT.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So let's move to our topic of the day. And we wanted to do this because last night again, Saturday, December 2nd, we're both texting each other and it's like, hey, this college football playoff is going to be nuts. How do you select your 4? And I think we both were like, yeah, this is a nightmare scenario. 1 and 2, reason number 675 why the playoff should have been expanded a while ago. So let's get to it, right? We got Michigan with the win. They grinded one out, although Iowa is that kind of opponent. They come out with some pretty good defense, and they play offense like the Chicago Bears, which leaves a lot to the imagination.
Iowa's defense is phenomenal. I don't want to
Yeah,
short you. They are one of, if not the most disciplined defense I think I've ever seen at the college football level in all my years. And I don't feel like I'm overstating it at all in terms of
No.
discipline and lane maintenance and whatnot. Like I would love,
A little bit of
them against
offense.
an option team. Like it doesn't matter. Like they have lane integrity, and I think their discipline really makes up for any
they
advantage you have athletically or whatever the case may be.
some parts of Iowa are in the greater Chicagoland area. So that style of football just looks so familiar, fortunately and unfortunately, right? So, and they got those Steeler colors too. So that defense, right? But what do we got? We got them winning. Of course, we've got Texas taking care of business, which was huge. That Washington versus Oregon game was absolutely fantastic. That was Friday evening, I think. But let's stick with Washington and Michigan, because I think they were kind of the locks probably going into today.
Absolutely.
Right? They were sitting
100%.
at 2, sitting at 3 respectively. So you can't knock them out. If they do, we got to have bigger conversations around some shenanigans in the selection process.
Sure.
But it's having Georgia, number 1, lose for the first time in 726 days.
I don't care about 720.
Just saying.
I care about the 50 something, 80 something of this season. But okay.
That's fair. That's fair. Losing the number 1, losing to number 7, Alabama. We've got Texas winning. Texas beat Alabama. We've got Florida State, and as I'm sure everyone heard last night, no Power 5 conference that has gone undefeated has been left out of the playoffs. But they're sitting there at number 4 with a number 3 quarterback. Offense was struggling last night, although Louisville is not some run-of-the-mill team. Louisville's got a good program.
Every team had a verified, legit opponent this weekend.
Yep.
Every team that played.
So we got 4 teams that need to be picked, and we got about 6 or 7 that are floating around out there that are saying, hey, we should be one of those 4. So what are your thoughts? Who should be in that? Who should be? So I think there's 2 questions here, though, Donray, right? There's who are the best 4, and then who are the most deserving?
Yeah. So we're not choosing the best 4. We're not talking about the best 4 teams.
Okay. Okay.
Let's get that out the way quick before any haters or anyone want to say anything. I'm very well informed that what I'm about to say, who should be in there, who's the most deserving or whatnot, is not going to be the best 4, or Georgia would be in there.
Yeah.
Period. But simply put, Florida State was ranked 4th. They beat a top 20, a top 15 team. And one could even say they did it with a 3rd string quarterback, which is probably even more impressive.
Yeah.
And they won. They won their conference championship. No one beat them. And they had a good out of conference, wins, especially the LSU one. So what win can, unless if Alabama was ranked 5th, okay, I'll give it to you. Coming into but even then, that wasn't the case. So they have to be in. I don't like FSU. I think, I haven't been sold on them like the whole year, really, to be honest, even though they were winning and stuff like that. But if and here's the caveat.
Yeah.
If the if they were, I was about to say BCS, if the college football ranking had them at 4 and they won, then
how do you go back?
You can't go backwards. You can't. They won against a good opponent in a championship game. You can't do you can't ask for anything else. If they were 4 at the time. Now, if they were ranked 7, 8, or 9, okay. But they were ranked 4. They won against a very good opponent in a neutral site championship game. You can't. I just can't entertain the idea of anyone jumping them unless the 5th ranked team beat a better opponent very convincingly. That'd be the only way.
Yeah.
If the 5th ranked team beat Georgia by 100, not 100, but multiple touchdowns.
Right.
So that being said, I believe Florida State's got to be in there. Now the last spot, here's where it's nuts, because you got the worst case scenario. You got 3 teams, and you might as well have had Georgia beat Texas for their only loss, even though they lost to Oklahoma. But if it would have been like Georgia beat Texas, but Texas beat Alabama, and Alabama beat, if you had that triangle, that's the only way this situation could have been any worse. And so, but it's not. I have to eliminate Georgia because, one, I'm not taking into account anything that happened before this year, or else you would have to do that in any other situation. And I'm not willing to do that. And so I can't take Georgia, even though I think they're the best team. So now we're at Alabama and Texas, who both won conference championships respectively. One could argue that Texas road was harder. However, Alabama had the tougher conference championship game. That's what I would agree upon. But the asterisk here is head to head. When it comes down to two teams, if your win-loss is the same, if you're both conference champions, my question is, did you play each other? And if you did, I'm done. And on top of that, you played it at Alabama. It's open and shut. I after sleeping on it. Now, mind you, last night I was like, this is the worst. There's no way you can put an argument to this making sense. It makes sense.
Yeah.
I put Texas in at number 4. Because last night I had Alabama as a number 4. I'm like, you got to be. But I'm going after sleeping it off and waking up. It's definitively Texas at number 4, and SEC does not have a rep, even though they are widely considered, not by me, but by most, as the best conference in football. I would say that they have 2 of the best 4 teams in the nation. And it's just bad luck how it all worked out that they're both going to miss it. But that's the case. I think them being in the same conference, some years will make it so that they both make the playoffs, as they did it, a couple years back. But I think both SEC teams are left out. FSU has to remain in. Texas jumps Alabama. Georgia should not be considered under the guise of most deserving. And I yield the floor. The time is yours.
Listen, I can't. I don't have much to disagree with. But I do. There have been some times where the team who won the conference championship game wasn't selected. And for those of us who were in Pennsylvania, I'm not a huge Penn State fan, but we can think back to a few years ago where they won. They beat Michigan. They lost to Ohio State, but they won the Big Ten championship, and they weren't selected. And in my opinion, I think there was a reason. I think the NCAA didn't select them because it was 5 years removed from the scandal, and they didn't want that in there. No one will ever report that, but still, that happened, right? But that aside, so I say that as you got Georgia, and it's been 700 and whatever days it's been. They are the defending, 2-time national champions, right? 2 times in a row. And their first loss was yesterday. I don't think you move them from 1 to 5. I just don't. But, and there's always a but, is we got Florida State. We got Florida State. I think everyone was probably expecting, 1, Georgia to win, but 2, that Florida State with their 3rd string quarterback was going to lose. Now, as I say this, it's again going back to what Donray and I talked about. Michigan and Washington, they're there. I think Michigan is the 1, Washington is the 2. I would not be surprised because of the shenanigans that is the NCAA, because they clearly they have an agenda against Jim Harbaugh, which is fine. Maybe he comes to Chicago as a byproduct of that. I wouldn't be surprised if Washington jumped them and became the 1 seed. They did beat Oregon, was number 5, right?
Yeah. 6.
6. Okay. So you can see that. But either way, they're going to be 1 or 2. Okay. So then you've got Florida State, you've got Texas, you've got Georgia. I don't think Alabama's even in the conversation because of what you said, which is Alabama lost to Texas. So, you would pick Georgia over Alabama. Alabama won the conference games. Like, yeah, but Georgia won the regular season. So this is the whole, is the regular season important that a lot of the old heads be talking about? Florida State won. You can't pass on a Power 5. That's 1. That are undefeated. They got to be in. So there's your 3rd team. It's Michigan, it's Washington, it's Florida State. I would pick Georgia over Texas. Now, you're supposed to assess based on this year. Yes, I am doing both of those things. I believe Georgia is the best team in the country. They lost a very close game within probably the best conference in America, and they haven't lost in almost 3 years. They're going in as the 4. You put them in at 4. Texas, sorry. Who did Texas lose to? I'm trying to remember.
Oklahoma. Oklahoma.
Get out
Red
of here.
River rivalry.
Get that's the river is not. We don't care. That no. Okay, that I don't qualify that as. What's Oklahoma ranked at? Are they even in the? They're hanging on to the top 25, aren't they?
Here,
The
yes,
top 20.
here.
So that's my 4. I am roll and here. So here's my matchup. And either way, I'm going to say if you pick Texas over Georgia, that's cool. I would, because I think that a Georgia loss to Alabama is better than a Texas loss to Oklahoma. So there's the justification. Okay.
Georgia loss to Alabama is better. Yes.
Got
okay.
that?
That's
okay.
fair.
Is that fair?
That's
but
fair.
either way, what I like, if I'm sitting there as the NCAA, I'm saying, hey, geographically, this is a really cool matchup. Like, you're not doing that to select things, right? But to have a Michigan or Washington, whoever's 1 or 2, one of them is going to play Florida State. The other is going to play either Texas or Georgia. You have you're covering all 4 corners of the state of the United States, which is a pretty cool thing. Usually it's Southern centric, but you've got the Northeast repping, you've got the Northwest repping, you're going to have the South repping in a couple of different ways. That's a cool representation.
I like everything you said. By the way, Oklahoma, now they're on the outskirts. They only have 2 losses. I think they're in like 12, 13.
Okay.
They lost to but they lost back-to-back weeks.
Listen, I'm not an Oklahoma fan. Every time they get into a playoff game, they be losing. So I'm just saying that's been a thing for 30 years.
Here's the thing. If Alabama didn't exist and you look at their body of work, I would be okay with Georgia staying at 4, dropping only 3 spots, and Texas, they were at 7, so not being able to jump up 4 or 5 spots to get into I'd be okay with Georgia over Texas, to be honest, even though it goes against my, one has a conference champs, one doesn't, but they both have 1 loss, and in that case, the conference chip to me isn't the deal breaker, because sometimes the conference is very weak and sometimes the conference is very strong, and who you lost to and when you lost to. So I'm okay with them winning the tiebreaker over Texas. This is where I was saying the triangle.
We gotta get you new headphones, man.
Well, I have a whole set. I think if it's just Georgia and Texas, then yes, I think Georgia wins the tiebreaker over Texas. But if it's just Texas and Alabama, I think Texas wins the tiebreaker over Alabama. And if it's just Georgia and Alabama, that's tough. I would have to go with Alabama because of the most recent game.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter because all 3 are involved, and that's the thing. But I like yours. I think you have great justification for it. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. I think biases will show here. I think NCAA is looking at this as there's a lot of money to be had. I'm sure they were hoping for a Michigan loss or
absolutely
a loss last night, so they can get some of that Big South money in there a little easier. But I think Texas, if you want to look at it from the more political, money grubbing standpoint, Texas has as much money as anyone. So, I mean, I think they get in. If you want to talk about natural biases that may be present within the NCAA, money generation, I don't know that you can generate more money than Texas brings.
That's it. They if they're in, that's the why. If they're in, that's the why.
It wouldn't surprise me, but I can see someone. It's easy. I think you can justify.
It's been a lot. Will this be potentially their first time in the playoffs since Vince Young? We got to look at the record books there.
No, absolutely.
No,
they haven't been. Right? I don't know that they've been a contender
since Vince Young, since that amazing game against USC. Reggie Bush, and give Reggie Bush his Heisman back, everyone.
I know. What are we doing already? I'm trying to think back. They definitely haven't been in the college football playoffs.
Yeah, we got to look at the record.
I mean, it's been a Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State mainstay with Oregon and random TCU and Michigan's jumping in there, but I don't I feel fairly confident they have made. Oklahoma's been there. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I can't think because I would be able. I think I'd be able to pull out the quarterback who would have taken them, and
yeah, no.
no, they've had a turnstile down there.
So that's what
So
we got. That's what we got. This is exciting. And again, as we opened up, this is reason 675 or whatever the number was of why there should be an 8. I
yes.
prefer 8 over 12. I know they're going to 12. But
Yeah,
somebody's going to get,
someone's always going to be left out. But
yeah,
when
but
you
we got
are fighting to be the
lots.
8th or the ninth best team, you have less of a you have an argument at that moment. But after 2 seconds later, it's like, oh well, just like the NCAA basketball tournament. It's like, yes, if you're fighting for that last 12 seed, and you could have got, but you know what? There's a whole season, and if you couldn't get in the top 60 definitively, and you're fighting over the last 4, well, that's different. You have an argument, but no one, okay, why? Spilled milk. But in this case, I think 8 solid, and this isn't some groundbreaking area. Division 2 and Division 3 have been doing this. It's been
Oh,
done.
yeah.
Or I'm
Yeah.
sorry, FCS,
And 2 and 3 and
and,
Division
and
2 and
two
3
and
for
three have been
decades.
doing this.
For decades.
So, and it works.
It works.
So just make it happen. So it'll be interesting. I would have loved the Power 5 and 3 at large bids, but 12 could work too, if they do it well and they still keep into account, if they still want them to be student athletes. I don't know if that's a thing anymore, but if they want them to be the student as well, I want to make sure that this playoff doesn't go into February or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Well, and as in Donray's, we had this entire conversation. We didn't even talk about the team that's in your backyard, who's sitting there saying, "Hey, we got one loss, and it's going to be the team who's going to be the number one ranked team in the playoffs, and that's Ohio State." So that's just
they have the Georgia argument.
They got the Georgia.
They have
argument.
the Georgia argument, except they didn't make it to their championship game was a week earlier.
And if the Big Ten, I don't know. I'm glad the Big Ten is finally getting rid of the East-West because your 3 best teams in the Big Ten are in the same division, right?
Every
it's
year.
Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State every year. So they're sitting there saying, "What about us? We don't even." Yeah. So Ohio State's got one loss to the number 1 team in the country, and it was a good game.
And it was a good
game. It was
game.
no different than Georgia, Alabama.
And they were on the road.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. So that them in Georgia have, and so if you had an 8,
could you imagine if there were? This would be an amazing playoff if there were 8
perfect
teams.
year for an 8 because I think you have 8. Maybe the 8th one
in the past you haven't.
Right, because you've got your 4, then you've got well, assuming you've got your, what do we name? We have 6, right? 6 right now who are in the running.
Michigan, Washington, Florida State, Georgia, Alabama, Texas. Those are 6. And then you add Ohio
Oregon
State
and
at 7.
Ohio State.
Yep.
I think Oregon and Ohio State easily go in there, and then you're talking. Well, Ohio State goes in there easily. I would imagine Oregon with that loss wouldn't drop below 8. I gotta remember who the 9 and 10 teams are, but either way,
Penn
now you're talking about the last team.
Missouri, Ole Miss, they're all
so
sitting
Missouri,
there at 9,
Missouri,
10.
And Missouri won that. Missouri won, right? They won their chip. So wait, no, they didn't.
No, they didn't.
No, they didn't.
No. Yeah, they're outside looking in.
So
shout out to them because they finished the season 10-2. Like Missouri doesn't do that in football. So shout out to them.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's impressive. So then Oregon just slips down to 8, but they stay there, and you have a legit 8. And if someone wants to argue about the 8th spot, fine, but you got 2 losses, champ. Like at that point, whoever they put in, you can't argue.
This was good. This was good. So let's do a real quick lightning round before we wrap up. Asia Wilson, glad you're back. Don't know what happened, but we're glad you're back.
Yes.
Major League Baseball hot stove has been pretty quiet. Although there's some noise about Juan Soto. Let's see where he goes. Yankees are on him. Blue Jays are on him. Mm-hmm. Phillies are retiring their red Phillies uniforms. That's interesting.
I didn't hear this.
Yeah, that broke last night. They're not wearing the reds anymore.
Wow. Okay.
So I think they're going to the powder blues. The Mike
I was
Schmidt.
Gonna say more powder blues are fine with me. And bust out the maroons. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's good.
That works. Winter meetings are that's usually when stuff gets
things will get rolling. Sure. So NBA, we talked about a little bit Ime Udoka and LeBron James, but I'm kind of disinterested because the Bulls are terrible, although they did win a second game in a row last night, so which is surprising over the Pelicans.
Yeah.
That's a fun name for a team. Go Pelicans. Good stuff. Sixers, they're rolling, doing all right. I'm happy for them.
They're solid. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other last takes, Donray, before we wrap it up, our first show?
Just I'm a true believer that Vegas typically has a pretty good thumb on things. I'm very interested to see how this Niners being road favorites at the 10-1 Eagles
Ah,
and the link
yes.
will go down. Thank you, Vegas. Thank you. Because something tells me that's just the chip that we need. Because Niners were
That's
very
crazy.
vocal, yapped a lot
Yeah.
over the summer,
Well,
and
yeah,
they've been crickets
for good reason.
since. So there wasn't as much bulletin board material, but your
It's
dogs
gonna be. Can't wait to watch.
your
Can't
dogs
wait
in
to
your
watch
own
that game.
backyard, 10-1, and your dogs. Let's go. I can't
Can't
wait.
wait.
Weather's not going to be nice again. Can we get a nice game one day? But
It's
I'm
perfect football weather.
425 can't come quick enough.
And if San Francisco somehow wins and they got home field advantage, this kind of weather is exactly what you're going to experience at San Fran in January.
True.
So,
but if they win, there's still a game back.
Yeah, Bears, please prep. You got a week until you play Detroit next week. You let them out at their own house. Get it right, because the schedule looks good after that. You got Arizona, you got Cleveland with Joe Flacco,